5 weeks in a row talking about audio tools. This is week 5 of 5 talking about limiters. What is a limiter? How do you use one? And why would you want to use a limiter? Okay, welcome back. Week 5, this is it. And then we're done with the audio course, moving on to bigger, better, greater, and wonderful, more wonderful things. So thank you for tuning in to watch this. This channel, I talk about gear, I talk about filmmaking, I talk about audio, composing, all things creativity. If you're into any of that, please consider subscribing to the channel. Each one of you is joining a family when you choose to subscribe. I'm so excited to have you on board. Looking forward to moving towards greatness in the future with you in 2018. Thanks for coming on board. Monday is the new year. We're so close. It's the end of 2017, 2018 is coming. So let's talk about limiters. Limiters are the end of my signal chain when it comes to processing audio for video, specifically dialogue, and that's what this whole course has been. The 5 tools I use most, starting with compression, then EQ, then de-essing, then a gate, and now finally a limiter. So what is a limiter? It's a dynamics processor that manipulates the amplitude of an audio signal, just like the compressor, the de-esser, the gate, and now the limiter. They are all dynamics processors where they mess with audio in different ways. They either bring it down or bump it up. It's a dynamics processor, messes with the amplitude. So again, let's remember our really crude and offensive drawing of the water going out over time. Well, a limiter is going to raise that volume all the way up, raise the amplitude at a designated amount, and then you set a threshold for how much, when you want that audio to stop. And when it hits that threshold, that audio is going to stop. So if we imagine that really crude drawing, that offensive drawing of the water that I keep doing in these, a limiter is going to raise that amplitude overall. Just raise whatever you have as much as you designate based on the first parameter. And then the second parameter is going to be some sort of a threshold that's like a ceiling, where when that water gets close to it, when it actually hits it, it's just going to stop. Like, it's just going to hit. There's going to be no going above that. Many times you hear terms like brick wall limiter or hard limiter, stuff like that. True peak limiting. Those are all different terms to differentiate different types of limiters. But the gist is a limiter is like a compressor with above a 10-to-1 ratio. Many limiters have a 30-to-1 ratio when the audio hits that threshold, meaning it's just gonna stop. It's not gonna go above at all. Like a compressor we talked about, when it goes above its threshold, say it's like 4-to-1, well, it comes down to like a quarter of its original size. Well, if it's a 30-to-1 or a 50-to-1 ratio, it's not going above that threshold at all. So the point of a limiter is to just put a giant wall up and say no audio comes above this line. And yet it's pulling the audio down, so it's not clipping, it's actually holding it back in place. So this is a really effective tool to use in mastering. Once everything is done in music, it'll go through a limiting process to bring the overall volume up, that kind of thing. Well, in dialogue recording, it's the same thing. We like to record at a much lower level than we'll actually output at, because then there's no risk of clipping while you're recording, and so you need to boost it in post. And whenever you boost, you want to make sure you don't have any clipping, you don't surprise the amplitude spikes that are going to clip your audio. So that's why you use a limiter at the end of your signal chain. Going to boost everything back up. So 2 parameters you need to be aware of with limiting, and they are called all across the board things, but generally the first parameter is called threshold, or gain, or input boost, or something of that like. And the second parameter is called maximum amplitude, or output ceiling, or output, or out. So it's just the 2 parameters. It's the first parameter is how much you want to boost the audio by in decibels, and where do you want the audio to peak at? Where do you want it to stop from a peaking perspective? So the first one, if you say boost it by 6 decibels, pull the threshold negative 6 decibels, the audio will come up 6 decibels in loudness. And then if you say, I want the output ceiling to be at -1, any audio that goes above -1 is going to be pulled, hit that brick wall, and it's going to stop. So just some examples here when I'm using a limiter. Typically, let's say I record vocals and I compress them real well and peaks are around -12, -10 dBFS. Well, I might bump the limiter all the way up like -8. And so like I'm getting really close to 0, but I'll set my output at like -0.6 or -1, depending on what kind of project I'm working on. So anytime that audio hits the output ceiling that I set, it's actually going to be smashed up against that brick wall and pulled back. And what makes a limiter so effective is that high ratio of compression, that 30-to-1, that 50-to-1 ratio on that output level that you set, that threshold on the output side of things. Because when that audio hits and goes above that threshold, it is just pulled back to right at that threshold. It's a brick wall. It's not letting it pass. And again, it's not clipping. It's just pulling it back at a factor much greater than regular compression. That's why you don't want to go overboard on limiting, because you can destroy the dynamic range of your audio if you go too hard on limiting. You listen to dance music, EDM, that kind of stuff. This is like, there's no dynamic range in that music for the most part, especially when like the drop comes. It's like all pumping right in your face at like 0 dB because it's been so pushed to that threshold. It's been so limited that there's no headroom. It's just all right there in your face. And that works for the genre. That's not a bad thing. That just is what it is. But if you listen to like jazz per se, you're never going to hear jazz that's smashing up against your thresholds. If you have a way of like monitoring your audio, just listen to different music, listen to different videos, watch the meters, see where the meters are peaking at, and you can tell how hard something has been limited, how hard it's been pushed at the end of its signal chain towards, you know, its output ceiling, depending on what it is. So that's it. You just have to think about where your audio is peaking, where your average loudness is when you engage the limiter, set your input gain or your threshold or your boost. But the hard limiter in Premiere has a parameter called input boost. And if you're using like a Waves plugin, it may be called threshold or gain. But that's just how many decibels do you want to boost the audio. So look at your audio and see where it is and boost it accordingly, and then set your out ceiling so that there's no risk of clipping. I always recommend negative 0.6 decibels, nothing above that, because there always is room for clipping once things get compressed on YouTube or on Vimeo. I just like to have a little bit of headroom there just to be safe. Headroom meaning some air, some space before the very, very tip top where clipping will occur. That's the audio course. It's done. 5 weeks, audio course is done. Let me know what you thought of everything. If you have any questions about limiting or any tools at all, I'm always still learning, so hit me with your concerns, questions, thoughts, critiques. I love it all. Love interacting, love commenting on YouTube. Also follow me on Twitter at Oliver J. Hughes. That way we can keep in touch outside of YouTube, talk about videos and ideas and creativity and all things over there. I love to share music I'm listening to, films I'm watching, stuff I'm inspired by over on Twitter. This was really fun to make. Hope you had a Merry Christmas and now a Happy New Year on Monday. Celebrate safely and wisely, and hope that 2018 is just like your best year yet, because I know it's going to be mine. I'm only going up, and I hope you are too. Thanks again to each and every one of you. Really appreciate you all. Have a safe and happy new year, and I will see you next week.